Hello and welcome to the Lean In, Lift Up podcast. I'm Nicole Martin, a Master of Social Work student at Cal Poly Humboldt. I live and work on the unceded land of the Cholula, Hoopa, Karuk, Matol, Tolowa, Senengwe, Wiyot, and Yurok people currently known as Humboldt County, California. I strive to approach this podcast with humility and respect while navigating all topics. I'd like to apologize for this episode coming out late. It's the end of my final semester of grad school, and these last few projects and papers took more time than I anticipated. I am happy to say, though, that I have finally turned in everything and I am done. I will be walking in my commencement ceremony next weekend. It shouldn't affect any further recordings, but I'm going to say sorry in advance if it does. This podcast started as a school project, and even though I have already received the grade, I'm happy to say that I will continue recording episodes for the foreseeable future. This podcast is a passion project for me, and I am so excited to continue working on it. Today's episode is titled Resource Scarcity, Funding and Staffing Challenges. We're exploring the structural and practical implications of limited resources in rural child welfare systems, especially in places like Humboldt County. Let's start with the basics. In rural counties across the U.S., child welfare systems are frequently under-resourced financially, logistically, and in terms of staffing. According to a 2020 National Child Welfare Workforce Institute report, rural agencies face higher vacancy and turnover rates, and their workers often handle far more cases than their urban counterparts. Barbara J. Pierce's rural child welfare practice confirms this reality with firsthand stories from rural social workers who describe driving hundreds of miles a week to reach clients, often without sufficient mileage reimbursement or institutional support. Professional isolation is palpable, especially for new workers entering the field with limited supervision. In Humboldt County, the same patterns emerge. Budgets are constrained, the cost of living remains high, and recruiting and retaining qualified social workers is difficult. This leads to burnout, inconsistent services, and ultimately families falling through the cracks. One Humboldt CWS job listing I reviewed asked for a master's level clinician to work full-time with high-risk families for less than $50,000 a year. That's not just unsustainable, it's dangerous. The strain isn't just felt on paper when a county is underfunded. It directly affects frontline social workers and the families they serve. Workers might have caseloads double the recommended national average. The Child Welfare League of America recommends 12 to 15 cases per worker. In many rural counties, including parts of Northern California, it's common to see 25 to 30 active cases per ongoing worker. This leads to reactive rather than proactive services. Preventative supports like parenting classes, mental health referrals, or in-home family therapy either don't exist or have months-long wait lists. Pierce highlights the emotional toll this takes. One worker from her book recalls, "You go home wondering what you missed. That one phone call that you didn't return, that one visit you didn't make, and you hope it's not the one that changes everything." In Humboldt County, for instance, entire regions like Southern Humboldt may have one worker covering a massive geographic area. If a crisis happens in Shelter Cove and that same worker is in Willow Creek, well, you can imagine the delays. Let's look at an example from Trinity County, just next door. Trinity has struggled with chronic understaffing, lack of access to specialized services, and transportation barriers. But despite that, the county has partnered with nonprofits to co-locate services, like behavioral health and child welfare, in shared spaces. They've also invested in paraprofessional roles, community health workers, peer advocates, to extend their reach. It's not perfect, but it reflects a strengths-based approach, using community ties and creative infrastructure sharing to bridge gaps. Compare this with Humboldt County, where siloed services and an overwhelmed workforce still limit how far innovation can go. The county is working on a 5-year plan to incorporate new interventions, and I have hope that things will change for the better in the not-too-distant future. Humboldt County is trying to implement these changes as well. The center at McKinleyville opened a few years ago and is a hub for services. There's also the new Hoopa Human Services building in Hoopa that shares office space with child welfare and behavioral health. Other counties nationally, such as in Montana and Alaska, have built rural child welfare strategies around tribal partnerships and village-based service models. These localized responses often achieve higher family satisfaction and cultural relevance than standardized state approaches. So, where do we go from here? First, we must advocate for sustained state and federal funding tailored to the needs of rural counties. The challenges here aren't just financial, they're geographic, cultural, and historical. Second, we need to invest in the workforce. This means offering competitive wages, flexible schedules, loan forgiveness, and ongoing training. Local universities like Cal Poly Humboldt have an opportunity to contribute to this solution by developing stronger rural social work pipelines. The university social work program is built around serving rural and indigenous communities, and while it is the only rural generalist practice social work program in California, there's always room for improvement. Pierce discusses mentorship programs and rural field placement as powerful retention tools. Workers who are trained in a rural context are more likely to stay. Thirdly, we need to listen to and trust community knowledge. Tribal programs, family resource centers, and grassroots mutual aid groups often step in where formal systems fail. Let's support them with funding and legitimacy. It'd be beneficial, in my opinion, to have more frequent or better program evaluations and needs assessments so the community and the institutions built to serve that community can benefit and grow together. The Ann E. Casey Foundation also notes that co-designing services with community members, not just consulting them after decisions are made, is critical for sustainable change. Even in the face of these resource challenges, rural child welfare workers show up every day. They drive hours to make a single home visit. They navigate burnout with empathy and tenacity. As one worker in rural child welfare practice put it, we don't do this because it's easy. We do it because these kids matter, and nobody else is showing up. Counties like Humboldt have a long road ahead, but they're filled with people who care deeply. Acknowledging the systemic problems doesn't mean we ignore the good. It means we fight harder for a system that reflects the values of equity, justice, and community. Thank you for tuning in to Lean In, Lift Up. If you're a rural social worker, a community advocate, or someone just curious about the realities of child welfare, I hope this episode offered insight and maybe even some inspiration. You can find sources and further reading in the episode description. I'd love to hear your feedback or ideas for future episodes. Please leave a comment or email me at leaninliftup@gmail.com. Until next time.